In this video, I want to talk about why your autistic spouse treats strangers better than they treat you. Your autistic spouse can be patient with a stranger, friendly with a coworker, and remarkably helpful to someone they barely know. Then they come home and barely acknowledge you. You ask a simple question, and their answer sounds irritated. You try to tell them about your day, and they stare at their phone. You need warmth, but they seem emotionally unavailable, and somewhere inside you, a painful question begins to form. Well, if you can be kind to everyone else, why can't you be kind to me? Now, it can look as if strangers receive the best version of your spouse while you receive what's left over. And after experiencing this repeatedly, it's understandable if you feel hurt, resentful, confused, or even emotionally abandoned. But today, I want to explain one possible reason for this painful paradox. It involves social masking, fawning, sensory overload, and the enormous amount of neurological energy an autistic person may expend while functioning outside the home. Now, this explanation may help you understand the pattern, but it doesn't mean your needs should be ignored. Understanding why something happens is not the same as saying it is acceptable. So to start off with, let's look at the painful paradox. From the neurotypical spouse's perspective, the evidence can seem undeniable. Your ASD spouse was pleasant at the restaurant, but impatient with you in the car. They spoke respectfully to their supervisor, but became defensive when you asked about an unfinished chore. They listened attentively to a neighbor for 20 minutes, but appeared overwhelmed when you wanted 5 minutes of emotional connection. And so, of course, you're going to conclude, they clearly know how to be kind. They simply choose not to be kind to me. Now, that conclusion makes emotional sense. You're responding to what you can observe. But observable behavior doesn't always reveal the neurological cost behind it. So what looks like effortless friendliness may actually require intense self-monitoring. Your autistic spouse may be consciously managing their facial expression, tone of voice, eye contact, body language, timing, word choice, and physical movements. They're trying to remember what people expect, predict how their behavior will be interpreted, and prevent themselves from saying or doing something socially unacceptable. So for most autistic people, ordinary social interaction is not automatic. It is a performance requiring continuous mental calculation. The stranger sees the performance, you see the exhaustion that follows the performance. Now let's try to understand social masking. Social masking is the process of hiding, suppressing, or compensating for autistic traits in order to appear more socially typical. An autistic person may force eye contact even though it's uncomfortable. They may rehearse conversations, imitate other people's expressions, suppress self-regulating movements, tolerate painful sensory input, or pretend to understand social cues that remain very confusing. They may also suppress their need to leave, rest, ask for clarification, or say, "This environment is becoming too much for me." From the outside, they may look calm and socially competent, don't they? On the inside, their nervous system may be working at full capacity. Now, imagine spending an entire workday performing in a play without ever leaving the stage. You must remember every line, monitor the audience reactions, control every expression, and adapt whenever another actor changes the script. Eventually, you come home. The performance ends, but the exhaustion doesn't. Your exhausted ASD spouse no longer has enough executive, sensory, or emotional energy to continue managing their presentation. Their voice becomes flat. Their tolerance for conversation disappears. Ordinary requests feel overwhelming. Even affectionate contact may feel like one more demand placed on an already overloaded nervous system. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean they care more about strangers. No. It means they have depleted the resources required to demonstrate care in the ways you recognize. Now, let's look at when masking becomes fawning. For many autistic adults, this pattern goes beyond masking and becomes fawning. What is fawning? Fawning is a threat-based response in which a person tries to remain safe by being agreeable, helpful, compliant, or excessively accommodating. A lot of NT wives want to call that emotional cheating. Now, fawning can develop after years of being criticized, bullied, misunderstood, corrected, rejected, or punished for getting social situations wrong. Your ASD spouse learned a long time ago that unfamiliar people are unpredictable. Strangers, coworkers, authority figures, or acquaintances may therefore activate intense social vigilance. They're thinking, oh, don't offend anyone. Don't make a social mistake. Make yourself useful. Keep everyone happy. Do whatever is necessary to avoid conflict. What appears to be exceptional kindness is often anxiety-driven appeasement. The person is not necessarily feeling relaxed, generous, or emotionally available. They're attempting to prevent rejection or social danger. This process can consume an enormous amount of energy. By the time they return home, they have accumulated what we might call an emotional and neurological deficit. They borrowed energy to function socially, and now the nervous system wants repayment. Unfortunately, that repayment often occurs inside the primary relationship. Now let's talk about why home becomes the recovery zone. Home is often the only place where the autistic spouse feels safe enough to stop performing. Now that sounds positive, doesn't it? But it can create a painful relational problem. The autistic partner thinks, this is where I can finally let down my guard. The neurotypical partner experiences, I'm the only person who doesn't receive your kindness. Those are two very different experiences of the same situation. The autistic spouse may see home as a sensory recovery zone. Fewer social demands, less eye contact, greater predictability, comfortable clothing, familiar routines, controlled lighting, and the freedom to be silent. But the neurotypical spouse may see the home as the primary place for emotional connection. This is where conversations, affection, mutual interests, shared responsibilities, and relational repair are supposed to happen. One partner comes home needing fewer demands. The other has been waiting all day for new demands. That collision can produce resentment very quickly. The neurotypical spouse approaches because they missed their ASD spouse. The autistic spouse withdraws because his nervous system feels depleted. The withdrawal creates hurt, so the neurotypical spouse increases their request for reassurance. That additional pressure creates more overload, so the autistic spouse becomes even more distant or irritable. Now, both people end up believing the other does not care. Now, if you're the neurotypical spouse, understanding masking doesn't erase the impact on you. We understand that. You may have spent years receiving the emotional leftovers. You may feel invisible when everyone describes your spouse as kind, patient, thoughtful, because the person they describe is not the person you regularly experience at home. So when you try to explain this discrepancy, other people may not believe you. They may say, well, I thought he was a great guy. He's a great worker. He's kind. I can't imagine him behaving that way. That can deepen your isolation as the NT wife and cause you to question your own perceptions. But let me tell you, your pain is real. Being someone's safe person shouldn't mean becoming the person they feel free to neglect. Safety is not permission to be chronically dismissive, contemptuous, or unkind. A neurological explanation can create compassion, but it can't replace relational responsibility. You're still allowed to need respect. You're still allowed to want affection. You're allowed to expect your spouse to participate in finding a workable solution. Now, if you're the autistic spouse, you may feel deeply misunderstood by this accusation. You may not be choosing strangers over your partner, I understand. You may be surviving social situations in the only way you know how. When you come home, your ability to speak, listen, transition, or tolerate additional stimulation may be genuinely impaired. You may also believe that you shouldn't have to perform inside your own home. You're right. Your marriage should not require constant masking. But there is an important distinction between unmasking and disconnection. Unmasking might mean saying, I can't talk yet. I need 30 minutes of quiet, and then I want to hear about your day. Disconnection, however, sounds more like silence, irritation, withdrawal, without explanation or reconnection. Your NT spouse doesn't necessarily need a polished social performance. They just need enough communication to understand what's happening and enough follow-through to know that their emotional needs still matter. So let's look at a practical solution here. The answer is not for the autistic spouse to mask harder at home. That usually just leads to greater burnout. The goal is to manage neurological capacity more intentionally and create a bridge between public functioning and private connection. The neurodiverse couple might establish a predictable decompression period after work or after a social activity. During that time, the autistic spouse can reduce sensory input, change clothes, sit in silence, use headphones, engage in a repetitive activity, or just rest without being required to converse. But the recovery period needs a clear boundary and a dependable point of reconnection. So, instead of just disappearing indefinitely, The autistic spouse could say, okay, you know what? Right now I'm pretty depleted and burnt out, but I don't want my tone to hurt you. So I need 30 minutes to regulate, and then at 6:30, let's sit down for 15 minutes and talk. That short statement right there communicates 4 important things. It's neurological, my issue here. It's not your fault. I recognize that my behavior affects you, and I intend to return. The neurotypical spouse can support regulation without being asked to accept indefinite emotional abandonment. And the autistic spouse can receive recovery time without being expected to perform before their nervous system is ready. Neurodiverse couples can also create a simple capacity scale. A green day means conversation and shared activity are manageable. A yellow day means connection needs to be quieter, shorter, and more structured. A red day means the autistic spouse needs significant recovery, but can still offer a brief statement of care and schedule a later time to connect. This replaces mind reading with observable information. Now, here's the accountability piece. There's one more point that can't be overlooked. Not every instance of unkindness should be attributed to autism. Autism can help explain exhaustion, reduced facial expression, difficulty transitioning, sensory defensiveness, delayed emotional processing, or a temporary loss of verbal capacity. But it does not automatically explain cruelty, intimidation, contempt, manipulation, chronic dishonesty, or refusal to repair harm. A depleted nervous system may explain why kindness is harder. It doesn't make kindness irrelevant. Healthy neurodiverse relationships require both compassion and accountability. The neurotypical spouse learns not to interpret every withdrawal as rejection. The autistic spouse learns that internal overload does not erase the external impact on his behavior. Both realities must be allowed into the room. So, why might your autistic spouse appear to treat strangers with more kindness than they treat you? Well, it may be because strangers receive a carefully managed social response fueled by masking, anxiety, and fawning. By the time your spouse reaches home, that limited neurological bandwidth has been depleted. Home becomes the place where the nervous system collapses, recovers, and stops performing. But as the NT spouse, you're not wrong for being hurt by the result. But the solution is not to argue about whether your spouse is kind or not. The solution is to identify where their capacity is being spent, how depletion is communicated, what recovery genuinely requires, and how the two of you will reliably reconnect. Your home needs to be a place where the autistic partner can safely regulate. It also needs to be a place where the neurotypical partner is treated as someone worthy of consideration. So, the goal is not forced performance. It is sustainable kindness, kindness that accounts for neurological limits without leaving the primary relationship emotionally starved. Because your ASD spouse may not always have the energy to give you the socially polished version that strangers receive. But you shouldn't have to survive indefinitely on whatever's left over. I'm interested in your experience. Please comment. I will read and respond to your comment. And please subscribe. I'll see you in the next video. Would you like to schedule a paid private coaching session? This will be in the form of a face-to-face Zoom call. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this Calendly link. If you click on that link, it'll open up my calendar. You can pick the available days and times that works for your schedule. You'll get a follow-up email immediately after purchasing a session that will have the Zoom link that coincides with the day and time that you picked. I will get an email too that you scheduled a session, and I will be available on that exact day and time, and we will talk. I look forward to working with you. Hey guys, this is Mark. Some of you may not know that I have a lot of books on Amazon. So if you like my videos, you'll like my books. I have several for ASD spouses, for NT spouses, and for the neurodiverse couple. Underneath any of my videos, you'll see this link. Feel free to click on that link and see what's available. I'm sure you'll find something that applies to you. So if you're struggling in your neurodiverse marriage, help is available, one click away.